If you have been following my channel for the past 2 months, then you'll know that I've been leveling up my druid, which is my 3rd ever World of Warcraft character. Now I don't plan to stop making videos on my druid. In fact, I actually plan to take it into TBC, but I've decided to take all of the druid videos so far and turn them into one long video. Now if that's not your thing, then please feel free to watch the playlist that I've created that contains all current videos and all future videos. And just before we get started, I would like to say that we are going for 10,000 subs by the end of the year, so any help is appreciated. It costs you nothing and it means the world to me. Anyway, enough yapping, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. It is that time again. Last week, I officially got to level 60 on my 2nd ever World of Warcraft character. And well, I really don't want to stop playing this game, even though it would probably be good for me both mentally and physically. I haven't seen the sun in 4 months. So I want to start another adventure in Azeroth. Now last time I did this, it was obviously on my mage, and to be honest, I sort of rushed it, doing the best farms in the game and farming XP as quickly as I could, but that's not what I want this new character to be about. I want to truly explore the game, do the quests I never got to do before, travel my favourite zones and zones I never explored the first time around, and most importantly, exploring a new class and learning the ins and outs. So step 1 to playing World of Warcraft, which is arguably the most important part, creating a character. As for my class, we're going to be playing a druid for a few different reasons. Firstly, I get to play as a cat. Secondly, they are very versatile, allowing me to take on any role in the game. Thirdly, I get to be a cat. And lastly, because I wanted to play a night elf, because I've never played a night elf before, including in retail. I mean, I don't even know where they spawn. I customized my character to how I liked and came up with the most original name I could think of. As we begin to load in for the first time, I can't help but get excited. New class, new race, new zone. First things first, I gotta fix that. Much better. I got stuck straight into my first ever night elf quest, kill night sabers and kill boars, and I gotta say, this zone is beautiful. It's like Elwyn Forest on mushrooms. Along the way to murder boars, I picked up another quest to collect moss. After completing boar murder, we have to climb a tree in order to visit our class trainer and learn our first new spell before heading for imp killing and more boar murder. I turned in another quest and we got to level 2, only 58 more to go. Next, we headed into a cave to kill spiders and take their sacks and steal an egg. I once again visited my class trainer and then headed out to the starting zone because evidently I'm very good at skipping quests, until we reached a nice little place called Dolinar and grabbed as many quests as my long ass night elf fingers could hold and got to work killing more sabers, more spiders and oversized pigeons, and the first of many quests where you have to fill a vial of some kind of liquid. I then headed deeper into Teldrassil to complete more quests and fill more vials. We also visited Darnassus for the first time to visit my class trainer and grab more quests that would hopefully get me to level 10 so that I could unlock my first form. I headed up to the backside of Teldrassil to kill a load of these fungus monsters as well as harpies. Man, those things are ugly. After finishing up those few quests, we were so close to level 10, and to be honest, there wasn't really any other quest that I wanted to do, so I just grinded out a few mobs until we eventually reached level 10, the first big milestone. I excitedly made my way back to my class trainer, hoping that I could now learn how to become a cat, but to my surprise, there was nothing. So with a quick Google search, I learned that you actually don't unlock cat form until level 20, but I could learn how to become a bear right now, but first I'd have to complete a quest chain. Of course you do. First step, we get given a free spell which allows us to teleport to Moonglade, which is handy I suppose. Once there, we first need to speak to a large bear spirit, which makes sense for learning bear form. For the next part, we needed to take a trip to Darkshore. Now, I've never actually done any content in Darkshore, really only passed through it, so I was looking forward to questing here. We needed to visit a cave in order to complete the next part, so I buffed up and cleared out the entrance before heading in and summoning the bear spirit. We then of course needed to return to the quest giver, and we had learned bear form. We then needed to make the long journey to Ironforge, and we learned a couple of professions: herbalism and mining, which I would later swap out for alchemy. I then wanted to quest in a more familiar place, so I headed to Elwyn Forest to meet up with a friend of mine. Now he's a little bit of a lower level than me, so I just helped him catch up whilst leveling my herbalism until we were both level 10 and could head into Westfall together. You know, I love Westfall. You've just got finished with your starting zone, and this is like the first step into freedom. We of course started by grabbing every quest available and got to work clearing all of the regular quests, like Westfall Stew, making us kill a load of wildlife for their organs. We also got started with the People's Militia questline because Rag really wanted the Red Defias mask, a purely cosmetic item for rogues, but after a good 30 minutes of farming these mobs, we were unable to get one. We then kind of split off. I went to go make progress on my quests, and Rag stayed behind to farm for his mask. I did the Knoll Paw quest and gathered up some Murloc eyes, and by that time I was getting a little tired of Westfall, so I decided to look for another place to quest for a while, since Rag had already gone off for the night, and settled for Lochmoden. I've said it before, but I will say it again, this is one of my most favourite zones in the game, not just because it's very aesthetically pleasing, but because the quests all work together, and you can get them done pretty efficiently. I started out here with some good old-fashioned kobold killing, and whilst we were here, we hit level 13. I also discovered that as a bear, I could take on more than one mob at a time and survive. I then started moving up towards the back of the zone, picking herbs and killing wildlife as I went. We then enter into a kobold mine in order to steal their ears and pick up lost miners' gear. I then turned in all of the quests and realized that there really wasn't any other quest that I could do here, since the others were all much too high of a level for me. So I decided just to head back into Westfall and finish the quest that I had started earlier. Once we were back in Westfall, I got started doing the People's Militia again, this time needing to collect 15 red leather bandanas. And whilst I was waiting for the Defias to respawn, I thought I would just get started on killing Harvest Watchers. I then started moving more to the north of Westfall in order to collect sacks of oats, kill more Harvest Watchers, and collect the Pocket Watch. After I'd completed those, I headed further south to complete one of the final quests for People's Militia and do the Defias Messenger, who the two people I was partied with happened to kill. And then it was time for basically the last quest for Westfall and the final quest of the People's Militia questline. A very simple one: kill 15 Defias Highwaymen, 5 Defias Pathstalkers, and 5 Defias Knuckle Dusters. After that, we were done with Westfall. No more quests to complete. Well, basically. And you know, the opportunity to do deadmines was getting closer and closer, but I just needed a little bit more XP. So I decided to journey to the east and into Redridge Mountains, another zone that I absolutely love. Once I was here, I got started straight away with the easiest quest on the list: collect 5 Gore-Tusk Snouts, which really only took a couple of minutes to complete. I then did the first part to a 3-part quest, collecting crisp spider meat. I then did the first Knoll kill quest, which can be a little tricky since they don't spawn here in massive abundance, except for when they are around the campfires, but that's too hard for me to solo. So I teamed up with a random guy and we smashed through it quite nicely. I then started doing the Condor meat quest, but died a couple times, which was okay because I had to log off for the day anyway. Logging on the next day, it was still pretty early, and I wasn't expecting any deadmines groups to be going, so I just listed myself on the LFG tool just in case, and decided to do the Defias Messenger quest just to get it out of the way. But after failing, someone invited me to join their group, presumably for a deadmines run, and well, I just thought, screw it, we can finish the quest later. So I took myself over to the deadmines entrance and patiently waited for everyone to arrive, and once since most people were here, I decided that we would just start clearing. And well, obviously I tank on my main character, so I thought that I would tank on my druid as well. I mean, the rotation isn't very complicated, considering the only abilities I can use are maul, swipe, and demoralizing roar. After a couple minutes of clearing the entrance, everyone was here and ready, so I buffed everyone up and began chugging the potions that I had been making, and got started with the first pull. We made it to the first boss, Rakzor, and I made sure to pull him away from the 2 adds that were standing next to him, just to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. We got him down nice and easy, but there was no loot, but that's okay since there is loads of nice loot that I can get from this dungeon. As I started pulling the next pack, I started to notice something. It is really difficult to hold threat on a druid, at least at this level anyway. For whatever reason, our hunter was generating so much threat, and it felt like I couldn't generate any, but I kind of brushed it off, and I'm hoping that as I level up, it will get easier. Eventually, we make it to the second boss, Sneed. Now, I always like this boss. I think it's a cool idea. You've got to first kill the shredder, and after you do, the boss himself pops out. Unfortunately, he did only drop his crappy cloth hands, and I ended up just passing on it. After clearing the next mine, we get to the third boss's room, and I do remember to be very careful when pulling here because these guys hit hard, and pulling more than necessary could spell death. And when we did pull the boss, it looked like it was going to get a bit sketchy, but it actually did turn out okay because our healer was pretty good. Eventually, we clear our way into the final room with the big ship in it, and we take on Mr. Smite, who we got down pretty easily. We then move along the edge of the ship, and once again, being as careful as I can, since in this area, I've been told it can be quite buggy, and sometimes if you make a wrong move, the entire area can get pulled. We then pull the next boss, Captain Foreskin, who dropped the Defias Blackened Belt, which is a pretty neat piece for us. And then it was time for the technically last boss of the dungeon, Edwin Van Cleef. Now he has the chance to drop the Defias Blackened Armor, which is basically our chase item of the dungeon. Sadly though, he dropped the horrible Corsair's Overshirt. And lastly, Captain Cookie, who doesn't really feel like a boss, but he dropped the Cookie's Tenderizer. And that was it. We had completed our first of probably many dungeons on our brand new druid. Last time was my first time trying out a druid, and really one of the biggest selling points for me is cat form. It's such a cool idea, being able to turn into a big cat and just maul away at your enemies. So that is the goal for today. Unlock cat form and explore its abilities, and maybe also get to level 25, because why not? To start the day off, I decided to head into Redridge Mountains in order to complete some of the quests that I didn't do last time. Actually, it was primarily finishing off the last part of Redridge Goulash, where we have to find dire condors and take 5 of their meat, which ended up taking way longer than it should have. I also headed up the back to complete the Everstill Bridge quest, basically murdering gnolls in order to loot a few items. I also attempted to do the axe collecting quest just as I was going past, but the only other quest that I had left to do were the elite quests, and I didn't really feel like finding a group for it, so I decided that I would instead go for a deadmines run. Ah, the joys of being a tank, finding a group in less than 3 seconds. Once we were all prepared and ready, we started to make our way towards the entrance and got stuck straight into it. So a couple of reasons why I wanted to run deadmines, obviously for XP, but also for the blackened Defias armor. An insane chest piece that would be very good for a lot of levels. There is of course the rest of the blackened Defias set, but I already have them. We make it to the first boss, Rakzor, and obviously take him down very easily. We then make it into the next boss's room and start to pull all of the goblins. Now, one thing I've noticed with druid tanking is that it can really only hold aggro on about 3, maybe 4 mobs at a time. And even then, a simple rogue most of the time generates more threat than me. But I'm sure that will get better as we level up. We take down just need and continue moving through the mines until we eventually make it to the next goblin room. And I, of course, do my best to be very careful. We kill Gilnid and sadly no caster ring, but we keep moving until we are in the final room of the dungeon. And this room houses 4 separate bosses, the first being Mr. Smite. And I quite like him since he's the only boss in the dungeon with any sort of mechanic. He just stuns the party for a few seconds, but it's better than nothing. We then make our way up the long path on the side of the ship until we get to Captain Foreskin, who is a little trickier, especially to tank, but we got him down no bother. He also dropped a lovely staff for the casters. And second to last is Edwin Van Cleef. Again, a relatively tricky one since he continuously spawns ad that do not die when you kill him. And sadly, he did not drop the Defias blackened armor, but I'm sure we will probably have another chance at it later. And after killing Cookie, I did actually go back in for an additional 2 runs. Sadly though, I seem to have a bit of an encoding issue, which rendered the footage useless, which is a shame because I met a pretty cool guy along the way. However though, that did get us to level 20, which means it's cat time. As excited as I possibly could be, I went back to Stormwind and headed for my class trainer, because unlike the bear form, we do not have to go through an entire quest chain, and can learn it directly from my trainer. Isn't that just the coolest thing? I mean, sure, I only have access to 1 damage dealing ability technically, but I am excited to try it out. You know, I think it's time that I actually explored a new place. So I hopped on a bird and started flying towards Ashenvale. Upon arriving, I decided to accept a quest from some bloke on the side of the road, because why not? He had us go on a pretty easy detour to pick up a few plants, pretty easy stuff. I continued my journey deeper into Ashenvale until I came across a nice little place called Astronar. I made sure to pick up the flight point because I very often forget to do that, even when my entire purpose of visiting somewhere is for the flight point. I grabbed every quest in the area, even the ones that were too high of a level, just in case. And then I first headed to this small pond area for a small quest chain, where we first need to collect a glowing gem from a random murloc, which I managed to get after only killing 1. I then headed to the west to help out another random bloke on the side of the road, who sent us on a nice and simple murder and collect quest, killing a lot of sea snakes. His following quest, he sends us to a small island, and I knew it was a little too high of a level, but I thought I would at least give it a go. Didn't quite work out too well. So I continued to do the rest of Ashenvale like normal, collecting weed and murdering these bear freaks. I mean, are these even bears? They're like humanoid bears. But after that, everything was too high of a level. However, there was a quest that led me into Stonetalon Mountains, and I was told that Stonetalon is always swarming with horde, so I went there anyway. First up was killing these pride wings for their venom sacs, but there wasn't that many spawns until we got further in, so I just did them as I went past. I then needed to visit this little shack in order to accept a quest, and I caught eyes on a little rogue, and I'm not entirely sure what to do in Druid PvP, so I applied him with a rip so that he couldn't stealth away, and then pressed claw. Worked out pretty well, I would say. I then accepted a quest from this guy to go and kill Ventrico, and I gotta say, I really like this area aesthetically. I really like the rockiness of it all, and there's a nice pond of water in the middle. It's all really nice. And I've said it before, but I will say it again. I am not built for the glory of the Alliance. I'm built for the sandy dunes of Durotar. But whilst I was doing the quest, I happened to clock the same rogue as before. So I killed him whilst his health was low. Made me kind of feel bad, but at the same time, it really didn't. After I was done with the Ventrico quest, I headed up the north of Stonetalon to finish off the Pride Wing murder quest, which admittedly took like 30 minutes. And of course, I went and grabbed the flight point. But after that, we were done with Stonetalon, and as enjoyable as it was short. So I made my way back to Stormwind to visit my trainer, where we would learn some very important abilities. Primarily, the ability Shred, which I'm told is going to be my biggest damage dealer. We also picked up Rebirth whilst we were at it, because why wouldn't I? I then went back into Redridge. Even though there isn't that many quests for me to do, I just love this zone. I finished the axe collecting quest that we started earlier, whilst also adding some new additions to my UI, like this energy bar. I also did the quest where we have to collect fish from dead murlocs, and I don't think I have ever seen mobs respawn this quickly in Classic before, like they were always on top of me. And lastly, I went and did the other gnoll killing quest, because it wouldn't be a World of Warcraft session unless you kill a minimum of 150 gnolls. But you know, there was just one thing playing on my mind: the blackened Defias armor. I only needed that to finish the set, and I would soon be outside of the XP threshold. So I decided to go back into the deadmines for one last time. Luckily for me though, this was going to be my first time DPSing the deadmines. Much more relaxed than tanking, and besides, a warrior is much more efficient for tanking anyway. Firstly, Rak Zor, and I gotta be real, I was having a lot of fun with this spec. It's nice and quick, the animations are smooth, and just overall feels really cool to play. It's just like playing a terrible rogue. But anyway, we make it through the first part no problem at all. Plus, Gilnid dropped a nice ring for the casters. We also then kill Smite and Greenskin no problem, which leaves us standing next to Van Cleef. And I said to myself, this would be the last time that I would do Deadmines. But all I could really do was hope that it drops. And nothing. Well, that was that. I wasn't about to go back in for like the 10th time just for a single piece of level 20 loot. So I consulted my map to choose another location to quest for a bit, and I went with Duskwood. Obviously, the first thing I did was fill up my quest log with as many quests as I could, and there wasn't many to do since I came here a level early, but I got to work doing what I could. And first up, Skeleton Fingers, which is the first part to a 3-part quest. I started by killing these skeleton horrors, but quickly remembered that I needed to go further south, since I needed to kill skeleton warriors and mages anyway. And you know, I've obviously done this zone before on my warrior, and I really didn't like it that much. I guess I'm just not a fan of the whole spooky darkness aesthetic. But this time, I was genuinely excited to quest here, and it may have taken 25 minutes, but I did eventually kill all 14 mobs I needed and collected all 10 fingers. Oh, and by the way, I hadn't mentioned yet today, but I have continued to level up my herbalism profession as well as my alchemy. Not really important, but I just wanted to say anyway. And next, I got to work on the second part of the quest, collecting spider venom, which took me 10 minutes, but I ended up being very close to the skeleton quest giver, so I decided to turn it in whilst I was there. Now, although I wasn't quite level 25 yet, it was getting kinda late and decided that that was enough World of Warcraft for now. Last time we had only just unlocked cat form, allowing me to claw away as a DPS. It would also allow us to run 30% faster than anyone else my level. However, at level 30, we are able to unlock travel form, which would make us run 40% faster, which is just crazy fast for questing. So that is the goal for today. Reach level 30 and unlock travel form. Starting the day off, we were on a bird, making our way over to Duskwood to continue questing where we finished last time. And I said it before, but I am going to say it again. The first time around on my warrior, I hated Duskwood because I've never really been a fan of the whole dark and spooky aesthetic. But this time, for whatever reason, I'm actually really excited to quest here. I was making my way to the northwest of the zone to pick up some quests that were more my level, and decided to quickly collect the 10 ghoul fangs for another quest, and also pick up another from some bloke in a shack. I then got started killing a ton of wolves. For whatever reason, killing wolves is always the best type of quest. Cat superiority. Along our journey, I also at some point hit level 25, which means we obviously get another talent point, and my stupid ass clicked the wrong talent, which means I've now got to pay to reset my talents. Fantastic. But no matter, I then had to murder 15 skeletal fiends, which was slightly annoying, but we got it done anyway. I then headed south to complete another quest where we have to kill 6 Nightbane Shadow Weavers, which was actually not meant for my level, but we managed to do it anyway. I then got started collecting 6 gooey spider legs, yummy, as well as also doing the next part of the Nightbane quests, killing 12 Nightbane Dark Runners, which again wasn't really meant for my level, so using Prowl, I weaved in amongst the mobs and targeted these specific mobs that were lower. Another thing that I absolutely love about this class. I then needed 8 Rot Blossom, so even more skeleton killing. I then teamed up with a couple of randoms to do the quest The Night Watch, making us kill 20 Plague Spreaders. We got that done nice and easily. Now the next quest, I needed to collect a crate that was surrounded by mobs that were 4 and 5 levels higher than me. So once again, I used Prowl to avoid basically all of them and strategically pulled the one closest to the quest item. And granted, it was pretty tough, but we did kill it and were able to retrieve the item. Now apart from 1 or 2 quests, we were now completely done with Duskwood. And I would say it was worth it, since we were now all the way up to level 26 and a half. And that's also where I decided to take a break for a while. Logging on the next day, prepared and ready for a productive day of leveling, I had a couple of options for gaining XP. Firstly, I could go to the Wetlands and continue questing, or I could hang about and try to get a group together for the stockades. So I quickly grabbed all the stockades quests, and instead of putting together my own group, I was just going to list myself on the LFG tool and then go and quest in the Wetlands whilst I waited. Efficiency. Once I arrived in Menethil Harbour, I did what any normal person would do and accepted any quest in sight. First up was some good old-fashioned murloc killing, and luckily these ones were green for me, so we were able to get it done pretty quickly. And not even 10 minutes later, we got an invite to a stockades group, so I began to hearth back to Stormwind. Once we were all here, we got stuck straight into it. And I mean, let's be honest, it's stockades, there really isn't much to talk about. It's 15 minutes of killing 90 mobs that look exactly the same. At least when I did this on my warrior, it was my first time exploring what little there is to explore in here. But since then, I've done quite a lot of boosting in here when I need some extra pocket money. So I ended up doing 2 runs with this same group, which allowed us to complete every single quest and got us to level 27. Afterwards, I obviously went and turned in all of the quests, which gave me another nice big chunk of experience points. And after that, I headed back to the Wetlands to continue questing. Now unfortunately, the next couple of hours were lost due to an encoding error, but basically, we did some quests in the Wetlands and got to level 28. That's it. So I started to finish off what little quests I had left to do, like killing crocodiles for their skin. I then had to do what was probably one of the most annoying quests I've ever done, called the Cursed Crew. We had to go into a sunken ship and kill 5 cursed marines and 13 cursed sailors. Now the issue I had with this quest is that all the mobs were bunched together, so I could never pull just one at a time. It was also in such a small area, so I could never really see my character or what was going on around me. And of course, it was underwater, so I couldn't really move and also had to make sure that I didn't drown. But after a solid 25 minutes, we got it done, and at least we didn't have to go back again. Oh wait, yes we do. At least this time it wasn't as bad, since it was only kill a single mob who wasn't even underwater. And that was it. We were finished with the Wetlands, and we're now level 29, which means we've only got 1 more level to go until we could unlock Travelform. So I decided to go for another dungeon, Black Fathom Depths. so I hopped on a bird and started making my way there. Well, an hour of standing outside of the dungeon, and I did actually manage to find a group to do it with, which was followed by another hour of waiting for everyone to arrive. Starting to think that this might not have been worth it. Eventually, we do get started with clearing the trash and making our way over the cool little parkour thing. We then make it to the first boss, Gamu Ra, turtle guy, and we get him down no bother, even though we did have a couple of extra turtles up our asses. We then swim under the little archway and take on Lady Saraves, who can drop the only piece of worthy loot in the dungeon, called the Naga battle gloves. By no means are they even remotely good, but they would still be an upgrade over my current gloves. But if you've watched any of my previous videos, then you will know just how bad my loot luck is. We then quickly grab the manuscript for the quest before swimming under yet another little arch thingy to pay a visit to Thaelred to pick up his quest, which I think is a nice little touch to the dungeon. We once again continue on our journey through the dungeon until we eventually get to the room of the next boss. Unfortunately though, some pretty wild pulling resulted in us wiping. Goodbye world buff, you will be missed. But we respawn and kill the boss, and then we take this orb thingy, which provides a small buff. Kinda cool, I suppose. We then take a detour to kill what was apparently a rare mob that I had no idea about, who dropped some absolutely crazy loot. We eventually start clearing out the area with all of the twilight until we jump down into the water to kill the dinosaur boss, Old Serakis, who dropped this crappy cloak. We then have to make the long swim back to land before continuing to clear to the next boss, Twilight Lord Kelris. Now he's not particularly interesting, but after he dies, we then have to go through an arena style thing. We need to click on 4 different torches to ignite them, and a wave of mobs will come and try to attack us, and I just think that's a pretty cool touch. And lastly, of course, is Akumai. And I've got to say, I much prefer the WoW Classic version of this boss, because in retail, it's literally just a snake's head that comes out of the ground. Unfortunately, we did lose our tank, so I had to take over their duties. But in the end, we were successful in defeating the boss. And that was it. We had completed our run of Black Fathom Deeps. Honestly, one of my favorites. It's not very engaging in the fights or anything, but the design of the overall dungeon is fantastic. After leaving Black Fathom Deeps and turning in all of the quests, we were so close to level 30, so I decided to head over to South Shore for a little bit of questing. Now the quests here are still too high of a level for me, but there was a couple that we could do, and I was hoping that that would be enough to tip me over into level 30. All we had to do was some Murloc killing. Peak World of Warcraft content. Once that was done, I quickly turned in the quest, and then time for more Murloc killing. This time I teamed up with a nice random paladin who was almost level 40. Not a clue what he was doing here, but I'm not complaining. And after a solid 15 minutes, we could turn in the quest, which got us to level 30, which means it is time to unlock travel form. It's always a great feeling when you're running to your class trainer knowing that you're about to unlock something new and something great. Oh my god. Cat 2. Last time we managed to get to level 30 and unlock what is possibly one of the biggest advantages that Druid has, and that is travel form, allowing the Druid to move 40% faster, and at level 30 that's kind of a big deal. Now the goal for today is to reach level 40, and that is quite a big jump and a lot of XP, mainly because Blizzard thought that it would be a fantastic idea to release Phase 4 4 weeks after they released Phase 3. Not a single clue why, which means I'm running out of time if I want to raid Zulfarrak as a feral druid. Starting the day, we were of course a little level 30, and I was making my way through the barrens on my way to the salt flats for some questing. Now a lot of people seem to not like the salt flats, but personally, I quite like it, because it's a very unique zone, completely flat, giving it this slightly ominous vibe to it. Now the quests here are all very similar and work together nicely, since you're basically running around the zone killing anything that moves. Vultures for their bones, scorpions for their venom, tortoises for their shells, and basilisks for, well, just murder the basilisks because screw them apparently. We are also collecting rocket car parts because this place is also apparently a racetrack of some kind. This place makes no sense. And you know, after that, we do get given another couple of quests, but they are way too high of a level for me. So I turned in all the quests that I had completed and decided that it was time for a little dungeon run to get some quick XP and landed on Gnomeregan. So I quickly made a little trip to Ironforge in order to collect all of the necessary dungeon quests before making my way to the dungeon entrance. And surprisingly, I do actually get into a group within 5 minutes. So I met up with the team and we began heading down. We began clearing out all of the mobs, and weirdly we actually skipped over doing the tech bot quest, but that's fine I guess. Once we were in the dungeon itself, we actually went down a path that I had never been in before and began doing a sequence that I think is part of a quest that I wasn't on. We began getting swarmed by a couple of waves of mobs until eventually a boss by the name of Grubbis came out. And it wasn't particularly difficult, but it was a cool little thing that I hadn't experienced before. We continued clearing our way through the dungeon, going down hallway after hallway that I didn't recognize, since in retail you typically skip most of the dungeon. We then began an escort quest, and unfortunately after escorting this NPC for a solid 5 minutes, apparently it was bugged. But no matter, since we continued our way through the dungeon until we get to the boss, the Viscous Fallout, which is a boss that still exists to this day inside of the retail version of this dungeon. And he dropped the Acidic Walkers, which is a nice piece of loot for the casters. We continue moving upwards in the dungeon in search of the boss Electrocutioner 6000, and of course we get him down nice and easy. Now the next boss is an interesting one, the Crowd Pummeler 960. Now as a feral druid, it does actually drop my Biss weapon, like Biss forever, called the Manual Crowd Pummeler. And when I first heard about this, I thought that this was great, since I could get my Biss weapon at level 30, until I realised that this weapon only has 3 charges. 3 charges that don't replenish themselves, meaning if I want to play a feral druid, then I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this dungeon in the future collecting this weapon. And even if it drops now, its stats are still insanely good for me. But nope, we get some boots. All that was left to do now was to start clearing to the end boss, whilst being careful not to pull the entire dungeon as we do it. And then it was time for Mechgineer Thermoplug, and originally I thought that we might struggle a little with this boss since he's a little bit of a higher level than us, but we did end up coming out on top. And that was it, we had successfully completed a run of Gnomeregan, which got us up to level 31. I think it's time we do a little bit of questing now, and after not so carefully picking out the zone I wanted to quest in, I settled for Stranglethorn Vale. So I took a bird to Duskwood and began running towards the jungle, and almost immediately after arriving, I began picking up some quests and began heading deeper into the jungle to meet up with some blokes gathered around a fire so that I could pick up even more quests, and then got stuck straight into questing. Now I don't know about you, but I absolutely love Stranglethorn Vale, because it is a beautiful zone with mostly simple quests, plus you occasionally get some nice PvP here, even though most of the time you just get jumped by a full party of level 60s. Now there wasn't an absolute ton of quests that I could do here since I did come here earlier than I should have, but there was enough for now. I first got started taking out all of the young Stranglethorn tigers and young panthers. I then went and did the first few quests of the Curzon questline, where we have to basically kill a load of people and take certain items off of their corpses, and doing that got us to level 32. I then once again made a quick trip to Stormwind to visit my trainer, since at level 32 we learn a very important ability called Ferocious Bite, which is basically the only usable ability to spend my combo points, since Rip really just isn't worth it. And then of course I went back to Stranglethorn Vale to finish finish up the quests there. Once again, making me kill tigers and panthers, basically the exact same as before, except this time we're also killing raptors. Fantastic. And that was it for Stranglethorn Vale, because we weren't high enough for any of the other quests, but I still wanted to come back later and do more, because this zone is awesome. So once again, I decided that I wanted to do a dungeon, and thought that we could do a little Razorfen crawl run for some more quick XP. Now Razorfen crawl isn't the most exciting dungeon, but you know, it's nice for a little change, and this would only be my second time ever running it. Now at the start of the dungeon, we were actually still waiting on the healer getting here, so I took the role of the healer for the first 5 minutes, and I gotta say, it's a little weird. I don't think I've ever healed, like ever. Never in retail or in classic, but we start clearing our way to the first boss, which we take down pretty quickly for only 4 people. We then move to the other side of the room to take down the other little boss that's tucked away in the corner, and after that the healer arrived, which means I could resume my captivities. We then make it to the next boss, Overlord Ramtusk. Now I'm still not entirely sure if there's something specific you've got to do with this boss, but for some reason I remember wiping on this boss the first time I did it, but we took him down fairly easily this time. After that we continue moving through the dungeon and into the little cave system where we fight the big boar boss Agathelos the Raging, who only dropped a pair of crappy green legs. And then once again we start clearing our way to the last boss, Chargla Razorflank, who dropped the shield. Now I actually thought that this is where the dungeon ends, but turns out if you drop down behind Chargla, there was actually an entire escort quest to do that I had no idea about. We speak to this little goblin to get it started, and he of course begins to move around at the speed of a snail, whilst we are clearing loads and loads of boars. And to be honest, there really isn't any significance to the quest. It's pretty standard as far as escort quests go, but it does end right at the exit of the dungeon, so we might as well do it anyway. And that was it. We had completed a run of Razorfen Crawl. Now, I actually went back in for another run of Razorfen Crawl because I really just wanted to get some XP, and we did all the same things as last time, except I did not have to heal this time around, and even this time around we ended up dropping down the back and doing the little escort quest, so I have no idea what happened last time. And that's when I remembered a place that is canon in every WoW character's journey, a place worse than hell itself. Scarlet Monastery. With little options left for grinding levels, I reluctantly began making my way over to Scarlet Monastery and braced myself for the next 2 days, because I was about to run Scarlet Monastery a lot. To begin my plunge into insanity, I started with a graveyard run that I ended up tanking. Now, I don't really like graveyard that much. It's a bit too simple and it has that dark and spooky aesthetic that I keep talking about. As for loot, there really isn't anything. The only thing would be a ring from a rare mob, but it's unlikely that we will even see the mob. After only a few minutes of starting the dungeon, we begin making our way into the dark catacomb type thing, and we are met face to face with the only boss in the dungeon, Blood Mage Thalnos. Although granted, he looks kind of epic. After that, I decided to do yet another run of Graveyard, this time with a full party. I then of course decided to do Scarlet Library, which I think is the only one of the 4 dungeons that have more than 1 bosses. The first being Houndmaster Loxy. Plus, the other good thing about this dungeon is I believe there's a guaranteed 2 herb spawns. The second boss is Arcanus Doan. Now, he's kind of an interesting one since he's one of the few bosses with an actual mechanic. A simple LOS mechanic that doesn't even one-shot you. But again, there's literally 0 loot to get from here for us. My party then wanted a graveyard run, so I stuck around for the XP, and once again, back to library. And that was kind of me set for the day, running back and forth between library and graveyard, farming out as much XP as I could, all the way up until I was high enough to run armory. And armory is the melee dungeon, providing some of the absolute best melee leveling gear, none of which I can equip. Now, you know, I don't mind armory, but don't get me wrong, it's still incredibly boring. But I think it's definitely one of the best for XP at this level, and I have fond memories of farming this dungeon, because it was like my first real grind in WoW Classic when I did it on my warrior. It took us around 10 to 15 minutes to clear all the way to the end boss, Herod, and he does also have a mechanic, surprisingly, which is of course the same ability that is on Ravager, where he spins and deals massive AoE damage. Basically, Blade Storm before Blade Storm. And then I went for 3 more library runs and another armory run, which got us up to level 36. And at this point, I was absolutely sick of Scarlet Monastery, gagging at the thought of having to do one more run of this incredibly boring dungeon. So I of course wanted to do some questing and decided to do some Arathi highlands. Now there definitely isn't an absolute horde of quests to do, since a significant chunk of them are elite quests, which I definitely cannot solo. I started out by doing the troll kill and collect quest, making us collect 10 tusks and 4 pouches, but we also get to sneak around in a cave on the hunt for a shadow knife, which is pretty cool. I then ran up to the back of the zone to kill 10 syndicate highwaymen and 6 syndicate mercenaries, but unfortunately that was it, because I forgot to record the elemental quest and the knoll quest. So I decided to play some oaths for some unknown reason before making my way into Stranglethorn Vale to continue where I left off before, since I was now a higher level. I first started by killing all 10 of the Lashtail raptors, and then for some unknown reason I went all the way back to Scarlet Monastery and did 8 armory runs. What the hell is wrong with me? But eventually I returned to Stranglethorn Vale, but this time headed to Booty Bay to pick up a chunk of quests there, and started by doing the quest where we have to kill basilisks and collect 10 singing crystal shards. Now the weird thing about this quest is that the drop rate for the item seemed to be extremely low, and the quest ended up taking like 40 minutes to do fully. I also decided to get the jungle stalker kills out of the way whilst I still had my world buff active. I also paid a visit to Venture Cove to collect tumbled crystal, which was significantly easier than the basilisk crystals, and then went on another murderous rampage against trolls so that I could take their ears, which took us up to level 39. Now that left us in a little bit of a rut because we weren't able to do any of the other quests in Stranglethorn Vale, so I either had to go back to Scarlet Monastery or head into the Blasted Lands to do what little quests the zone offers. So I entered into the Blasted Lands and immediately ran to this hole in the ground that's filled with dwarves to pick up the first quest, which we simply need to hand in to a guy that is just up the hill, and I also accepted a buzzard kill quest from him. I then also picked up an ogre kill and collect quest that I decided to do first since there was kind of buzzards everywhere anyway, so I could just do that at the same time. Now the ogres was somewhat of a tough one since they were a little bit higher than me and I did not have a rallying cry of the dragon slayer, but we did get it done in the end. Also shout out to this guy. As for the buzzard quest, I found this little area that had the bones of some giant creature with tons of buzzards circling around it, which got the quest done. And that kind of left us in the same position as before, because we were already done with the quests here. But at least Alderman is literally right around the corner. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, I went back to Scarlet Monastery again. This time for a cathedral run and 2 library runs, which got us to level 40, which means that we had achieved the goal for today. But there is still one more very important thing that we needed to do, one of the biggest leveling milestones, and that is of course to purchase our mount, which I have decided to call Cat, which means I am a cat called Cat riding a cat called Cat, and next to Cat the cat and Cat the cat is Cat the cat's pet cat. I think I might be losing it slightly. Last time, we were able to go from levels 30 all the way up to 40 by doing basically nothing but Scarlet Monastery. And we were able to unlock some very important abilities and purchase our first mount, which I have decided to call Cat. Now for today, I would really like to hit level 50. Now I know that is a crap ton of XP to be farming, but there is one advantage that I recently gained over everyone everyone else. Starting off the day, we were in Dustwallow Marsh, prepared and ready for some questing, because I can't lie, there really isn't all that much to do between levels 40 and 45. As I was on my way to Theramore Isle, I accepted a quest from some random bloke, which happened to be an escort quest, and we began walking through the forest. Of course, mobs begin to attack our little guy, just like any other escort quest, but since we are 3 levels above the mobs, we were able to claw through them like butter. We eventually make it to the road and our little guy runs off. Thanks. Once again, as I was trying to make it to Theramore, we pass a little house, so I accepted all of the quests there as well. And then when we actually finally did make it into Theramore, I of course made sure to grab every quest that I could there, and got stuck straight into completing them, by first running up the shore to hunt for turtles, because we needed to kill them and rip out 8 of their tongues. How lovely. We also stopped off at this little island that was absolutely filled with murlocs in order to take their heads, which unfortunately ended up them swarming me and killing me. Classic. After, I headed up to the back of the zone to kill a load of spiders so that I could steal 50 of their eyes, which wasn't too difficult considering they are spiders. Now that's when I came across a bit of a funny quest, where all you have to do is turn in a random crafted weapon. I mean, I got to know what this is about. I have to know what the reward is, right? And it was a little bit of a pricey item, which kind of got my hopes up for what the reward could be. So I excitedly made my way over to the mailbox to pick up the weapon and return to the quest giver, and the reward might as well have been nothing. With Dustwallow Marsh now completed and finished, I once again had to go through my very limited XP options, and I went with Stranglethorn Vale. Now I wasn't too happy about having to quest here. I mean, I do like the zone, but I'd already done a lot of quests here previously, and I mean, fair enough, there was a little bit more to do here than I had originally thought there was. I started off with this troll killing quest where we just need to kill these trolls and take 18 of their tusks, which was a little bit harder than I thought it would be since there was quite a few parties of horde going around, but we did get it done in the end. I then headed up all the way to the north part of the zone onto this little island where loads of these water elementals are going about, and we have to kill them in order to collect bracers. And since this was on a secluded island, I was unbothered by any horde parties, so I was able to get it done nice and quickly. And lastly, for Stranglethorn Vale, I headed back south to do a nice and simple quest of killing 10 pirates and picking up a couple of charts. And that was it for Stranglethorn Vale. So with 2 zones done, I was now level 41 and we could maybe start to think about running a dungeon or 2. And I decided that I would go for some Razorfen Downs runs. So I quickly grabbed all the quests that I could and began making my way towards the dungeon. It didn't take long for me to find a group to run it with, and we got stuck straight into clearing our way to the first boss. Now at this point, I have done this dungeon quite a few times. Every single character I've created so far, I've ended up running this dungeon at least a couple times. And this dungeon route still confuses the hell out of me. For some reason, we skipped over the first boss and went straight to Mordresh the Fire Eye. I've always quite liked this boss. One big skeleton on the big pile of bones that he's been using to reanimate his minions. Pretty cool. We continue our way through the dungeon, clearing any and all mobs in our path until we get to the next boss, Glutton. Now he actually does have the chance to drop the only piece of loot that we are interested in, and that is of course the flesh hide shoulders. And luckily for us, it actually does drop, but unfortunately the other druid is the one to receive them. Feeling a little disappointed about the loot, we continue on our journey, clearing pack after pack up this rock in the center of the dungeon until we reach the final boss, Amnanar. Now again, he doesn't drop anything that we particularly care about, but we still kill him for the XP and quest completion. After completing our first run of Razorfen Downs, we were still only a little bit into level 41, and with my XP the options being basically nothing now, I kind of had to farm Razorfen downs, which wasn't all bad since I would get another chance at getting my shoulders. After waiting for over an hour for my entire party to get to the dungeon, we finally begin. We did basically the same thing as the last run, only this time we in fact did not skip over the first boss. Now he's a weird one since you actually have to spawn him in using the gong thing that's located in the same room. You hit it once to spawn in a wave of mobs and then hit it again to actually spawn the boss himself. After that we then continued like normal, killing Mordresh and moving on to killing Glutton, and sadly our shoulders did not drop, which is a little disappointing, but it's okay since we will be able to upgrade them when we're inside of Maraudon anyway. And once again the next 10 minutes were spent clearing our way up the rock until we get to Amnanar and take him down no bother. After we were done with the second run, I really didn't feel like going back into the dungeon for a third time, so whilst I was in Darnassus updating my alchemy recipes, I had a quick look at my map and I noticed that I still had a couple of unfinished quests in Desolace, so I eagerly began making my way there. Now granted, there was not a massive amount of quests that I could get done, but there was a couple, and at this point I was getting desperate. I first headed to the east to grab this quest that I left out last time, where we need to swim across to this little Naga-filled island, and I'm now realizing that I really need to get myself aquatic form. Now, I feel bad for what happened because there were two guys waiting to kill the mob, and my intention was to leave it, but it aggroed onto me for some reason, so I kind of had to kill it. Now, I do feel bad, not really, but kinda. I then went further south towards Maraudon and attempted to do the escort quest, but ended up dying due to the patrol of 3 mobs aggroing onto me, so I decided just to skip it. And that was it for Desolace. A single quest, and I was so desperate for XP that I went back to Razorfen Downs. Now we did the exact same things as the last runs. Killed Tutankash, Mordresh, then Glutton, who once again did not drop my shoulders. And then of course, lastly was Amnanar. Now after the third RFD run, I was sick of it. I really just didn't want to do it anymore. And this is the point where I stopped playing my druid for a few days because I left to record my most recent video about the 350 mob Maraudon boost. By the way, if you haven't watched that, then go do that. There's also the full length video and the playlist, so feel free to check those out after this video. The point is, I now know how to do the most insane, hardest, and most broken farm in the game. So instead of struggling through the next few levels, I decided to boost Cat a bit. Now, I'm not going into detail about the farm in this video, but basically we start at this Hydra here and run through the entire dungeon, fire blasting and counterspelling everything until we eventually get all the way back to the purple entrance, where we use these prongs to juggle the mobs back and forth whilst sending blizzards to damage and slow the mobs. And I didn't want to go too crazy with the boosting since I actually prefer just leveling the character normally, so I did just enough to unlock some nice fresh content for us. So I took Cat from the end of level 42 up to the very beginning of level 48. Now that that was done and out of the way, I now had about 10 different zones that I could visit to explore and quest. However, we were now also a high enough level to run 2 quite important dungeons. Firstly, Zulfarrak, so that I could get the carrot on a stick trinket. Secondly, Maraudon, mainly for the black stone ring, and although it isn't best for me, it's still a very close second. So I quickly grabbed all of the relevant quests and began making my way over to Maraudon. Now I was a little bit late, so my party had already started clearing a little bit, but that's no big deal. Now this run we were actually running with what I assume was a fresh 60 mage, who was after the nature resistance items, obviously so that they could learn the Maraudon boost too. We make it to the first boss, Noxian, who we obliterate quite quickly, and luckily for the mage, he does get one of his 2 needed trinkets. Not long after Noxian, we make it to the second boss, Razorlash. Now, this plant does have the chance to drop the pair of shoulders that are even better than the BFD ones. But of course, I once again lose my shoulders to the tank. We continue our way through the slime portion of the dungeon on our way to the purple side in order to take out Lord Viletongue. Now, I've always quite liked him, because at a first glance, he's just a regular boss standing in his room. But when you actually pull him, 2 mobs pop out of stealth to attack you, and I just think that's a nice little thing. We then run back the way we came through these slime pools to Celebrus the Cursed, and he can drop another item that the mage will want, the Drove Keeper's Cape, offering 12 stamina and 10 nature resistance. Now, luckily for him, he does get it. We then start making our way to the last section of the dungeon, and possibly one of the most aesthetically pleasing parts of any dungeon in the game. I mean, just look at this room. After about 5 minutes of clearing out the behemoths, we make it to the final boss of the dungeon, Princess Theradras, who can obviously drop the precious Blackstone ring. But you know me, I'm not allowed loot, apparently. Now, I say that was the last boss, but there's of course this little goblin boss that we went and killed, just because. And we also decided to skip Landslide, which is perfectly okay with me. Feeling a little bit disappointed by not getting any of the loot I wanted, I made my way over to Gadgetsan and began preparing for a run of Zulfarrak. I ended up joining a group that was made up of 4 druids. Once everyone was here, we began straight away clearing waves of trolls until we eventually get to the first boss, Theka the Martyr, who did not drop any loot whatsoever. We then cleared every single one of these scarabs in order to get as much quest completion as possible, before we moved on to the second boss, and to Sol, who we got down quickly, and he dropped the vice grips of the monkey. We then started up Witch Doctor Zumra, and we actually stayed and popped every single one of the graves, obviously for XP, but once again to try and get as much quest progress as possible. We then went to the big staircase and did the big encounter there, where we basically get swarmed by mobs for a few minutes. And now it was time for technically the last boss of the dungeon, Chief Ukroz Sandscalp, who dropped Ripsaw. Now, there is one more boss, and that is of course Gazrilla, and we need to kill him in order to complete the quest that would give us the carrot on a stick trinket. Sadly though, no one in our group had the mallet to spawn him in, but we did actually go all the way around the dungeon, killing every troll in sight for the quest, which was pretty cool since I got to see parts of the dungeons that I hadn't seen before. Once we were done with our first run, I of course stayed for another, just for another go at getting the quest done. We did basically the exact same things as the last run, killing Theka, Antusol, Zumra, Staircase, then Sandscalp. And then of course, the big reveal was that no one had the mallet. Bit unfortunate, but to be honest, I wasn't too bothered. It is what it is. Plus, doing this second run got us to level 49 and allowed us to complete all of the remaining quests. And that was it for Zulfarrak. I didn't feel like going back in again, but what I did feel like doing was having another go at Blackstone Ring, which might have turned out to be one of the worst runs I've ever had. So everything started off really well. We were chilling, waiting for the tank to arrive. I also apparently got married to the rogue against my will, and it did take a while, but eventually he did get here, and we started off by doing the quests located around the entrances of the dungeon, before we headed to the orange entrance and began the actual dungeon itself. All was fine, we made it to Noxian, although granted it did take a little while because we almost wiped on the green sludge slimes. And this is when the Tark started crying about dispelling or something, and you know, maybe it's a bad day. You know, you brush it off like nothing happened. You make it to Razorlash, and once again, I'm hoping and hoping that I can get the shoulders. And they do actually drop. Unfortunately though, I'm rolling against my new significant other. We continue on our way to Purple Side, once again struggling with the slimes, but eventually we do get to Viletongue and take him down. Then Celebrus the Cursed, and finally moving towards Princess. Now, unfortunately, the rogue lagged and pulled a bunch of mobs, which is no big deal. You know, it happens. The tank, on the other hand, was really not happy. Now unfortunately, I get feared by the next boss into the pack next to us, which obviously killed us again. But we res, kill the boss, and eventually make it down to Princess. And at this point, my gear was just gone. I was completely naked, but I continued to do my best anyway. But the hunter died, I obviously died due to having no gear, and it was a very good attempt from the remaining 3, but sadly, they wiped in the end. Now, the tank reses before all of us, accidentally pulls the boss, blames everyone but himself, then leaves. Now, I understand getting frustrated, it happens, but if you're just going to be a dick about it, then piss off, because all you're doing is ruining other people's vibes. So obviously we had to just ditch the rest of the run, and I actually did take the party in for a couple of free boost runs, which they seemed to appreciate. When I logged on the following day, I knew I was pretty close to level 50, and I thought maybe I would do another dungeon, or maybe start questing in a new area. But after turning in all of the quests from the horrible run the night before, I was actually so close to level 50 that we might as well say that I was level 50. Last time we got to level 50 by doing quests, dungeons, and all kinds of traditional leveling methods. But now we move into the longest and hardest part of any classic WoW journey, levels 50 to 60. And as much as I'd like to say the goal for today is to get to level 60, unfortunately that just isn't possible normally. But we can start to think about our end game gear, and that's why the goal for today is to get the Hand of Justice trinket, one of the absolute best trinkets in the game for melee DPS, but it only has about a 2% drop rate. But luckily for me, I have an advantage over everyone else. Starting off the day, we were in Feralis, ready to grind out the much needed XP, and I was doing a quest that I've never seen or heard of before, and it's a bit of an odd quest. We have to escort a lost night elf, which, I mean, is pretty normal, we get escort quests all the time, but in this one, the girl gets distracted, and we have to use a bell to call her back to us. I only say it's odd because it's not the type of quest that you would have thought was in Classic. It feels much more like a retail quest. After returning Shay the Night Elf to her rock dude, I took the boat over to Feathermoon Stronghold, where I picked up every quest I could find and also grabbed the flight point, and got started with collecting 10 Naga scales, which is exactly what it sounds like. Kill Naga and tear off their scales. I then headed back across the water in order to do a few more quests, like killing water elementals in order to collect water cores. And then another weird quest, having us kill some big water giants, but obviously they are big and elite mobs, so we wouldn't be able to solo them. But we are given, I guess, a shrink ray, which will shrink the giants and allow us to kill them. Pretty cool stuff. I then headed deeper into Feralis to do the Yeti Kill and Collect quest, and the funny thing about this one is I remember doing this quest very quickly on my warrior, since if you skim the Yetis, you have a chance at getting a quest item as well. But obviously, we don't have that, so it did take a little bit longer. I then went and did the Gorduni Ogre Kill quest, which took a while because the shamans did not want to spawn for some reason. And finally for Feralis, I headed back across the water to the second island, and stealthed into this cave in order to take down a little mini-boss. And that was it. We had finished Feralis. I mean, you know me, I skipped the ones that I didn't want to do. But the next time I logged on, it was a peaceful, late night session in Tanaris. I was out killing ogres, killing massive plant monsters for the Noggin Fogger quest, picking up random dusty relics from the dirt. All was good. And then I decided that I would go off and do the pirate killing quest, since it's late at night and I know if that I leave it till tomorrow, this place is going to be crowded. And I was just killing my mob when our villain showed up. A random, hostile mage trying to take advantage of the fact that I had a mob on me. I try my best to fight, but since I don't have the sufficient mana or health, he ends up killing me. But I wasn't going to let that stand. I was going to take him down. So I engaged him, both of us at full health and mana. The fight was looking good for me, until a random shaman came out of the shadows and decided to make this a 2 versus 1. Even when I tried to make it fair, the horde always come up with a scummy tactic. But I was determined to get this mage by himself. Show him that if he did play fair, he would lose. And that's when I found my chance. He's full health, full mana, So I open him with a Ravage, followed by a Claw. He tries to Frost Nova me, but I power shift to break it. Trying desperately, he blinks away, so I switch into Bear form and Feral Charge him to interrupt his spell casting. He hides in his Ice Block. That's fine. And maybe I should have taken the time to reset, but my Feral Charge was about to be off cooldown. He blinks away and I charge at him once again. I hit him with a Bash to stun him and switch to Cat form and then Shred, and finish him off with a Claw. No shaman to save you this time, mage. And unfortunately, I never saw him after that. Look, I know I'm not very good at PvP, but I think this was probably the most fun fight I've had. After returning to Gadgetzan and turning in my quests, I decided I would finish the Noggenfogger quest chain. Not because I had any use for Noggenfogger, but just because I wanted to see if the game would allow me to become a tiny cat. So, I hopped on a bird and began making my way over to the hinterland so that I could complete the next quest. Once there, we have to dive into a pond in order to pick up a mushroom. Simple. And then it was back to Gadgetzan to turn in the quest. A 45-minute round trip. You cannot convince me that this wasn't worth it. I finished up what was left in Tanaris, mainly the Waste Wander quests and the Bug Murder quests. After that, we had finished Tanaris, like genuinely every single quest I had done, apart from a couple of quests to the east because I was too lazy to go over there. But the point still stands. So, I looked at my map and began to scan for zones that I wanted to quest in, and went with Searing Gorge. I arrived and began picking up all of the quests as per usual, and got started with the quests up top first. And as I was looting a little chest, I came across another druid. My initial intention was to kill him, but he was actually quite friendly. I continued working on my quest when I got invited by a dwarf priest, and he was level 60, but he had the intention of completing every single quest in the game, which I fully respect. Also, shout out to this guy. So that was me for the next few hours. We did basically everything there was to do. We took down 1,000,000 dark iron dwarves, 20 golems, and 20 spiders, until we eventually decided to jump into the lower part of the cauldron where we would once again murder a gazillion dwarves. But we continued to move whilst in this underground area, and we were able to find Overseer Maltorius, who we needed to kill for a quest. And I thought that maybe we would struggle with this since it was 3 elite mobs, but we were actually completely fine. We then jumped down to the Incendosauruses to kill 20 of them, and I don't think I have ever seen a mob respawn as quickly as these things. We then made it back up to the surface and decided not to do the Spyglass quest since the drop rate is mega low. So I turned in all of the quests and said goodbye to my little dwarf friend, and I logged out for a bit. When I logged back on later the same day, I went back into the hinterlands for a few more quests. Now I know there really isn't many quests here, but I was extremely close to level 52, and I wanted to squeeze out that last few bits of XP so that I could start questing in my favourite zone in the entire game. I got started with collecting the troll tribal necklaces, and whilst I was at it, I did the cage checking quest, and then headed further into the hinterlands to another troll camp where we could also check the last cage. Simple stuff. And finally for the hinterlands was the slime quest. Just kill a few slimes. That is the most standard fantasy MMO quest imaginable. And we got that done pretty quickly. I then returned to the dwarves to turn in the quests, and we hit level 52, which means it was time for me to finally return to my favourite zone for the first time in ages. But what zone is that? Fellwood? Burning Steppes? Nah. I love Ungoro Crater. Everything about this zone is amazing. It does the jungle aesthetic perfectly. The trees make you feel isolated from the rest of Azeroth as they cover the sky above you. Little streams running through the entire zone, and the enemies just fit. Dinosaurs and giant bugs. Perfect. As I ran into the zone for the first time, I could not be more excited. I first stopped off at this little Tauren NPC to grab a couple of quests, and instead of going straight up to the back of the zone, I decided to get some quest completion down the south of the zone first, starting with killing a few oversized bugs for a scent gland and gathering Ungoro soil. I then decided that it would probably be best if I just quickly grabbed the quest to the north, you know, to be efficient and whatnot. So as I was going, I was gathering blood caps and then decided to kill the tar lurkers for the super sticky tar. But eventually we do make it to the north part of the zone, so of course I picked up every quest in sight and then got straight straight back to questing. And the other thing I love about this zone is that everything works together. You're going off to do one thing, but as you're going there, you find 15 different kinds of mobs to kill. And that was me set for a few hours. I ran around the entire zone, killing the pterodax, living plants, and dimetrodons. Basically, if it moved, I was going to kill it. And I was turning in some of the quests, and I noticed that the rewards for the next one were amazing, and would give me a chest piece called Grizzled Pelt. 17 strength, 16 agility, and 11 stamina. Well, obviously I have to have that, but that would require me to go into Sunken Temple, a dungeon that I had never done before. But I thought, screw it, why not, let's do it. So I hopped on a bird and started making my way to the dungeon entrance. After waiting for like an hour for everyone to arrive, we finally got started by making our way through the never-ending stairs. And we decided to first clear out all 6 of the balcony mini-bosses, which is exactly what it sounds like. We clear around in a big circle and go out onto 6 balconies to kill a mini-boss. Once everything was clear, we then needed to click on a bunch of statues in the right order. So we all went out onto our own balcony and clicked until it was right. Then a new boss spawns down below, so we drop down to clear out the trash and start to attack the boss. And it turns out this is actually what I needed for my quest, so thank God we went through that entire process. We then jumped down into the main area of the dungeon and began to clear out every single trash mob we could find. Because in this dungeon, once you pull the last boss, if there are any dragons still living, they will all rush you at once. Eventually, we make it round to this dark room that is filled with loads and loads of trolls, and they were annoying. They fear all the time, and they turn into indestructible spirits that chase you around. Really just not a good time. But after a few minutes of clearing, we get onto the first boss, Ogom the Wretched, who dropped just a cloth cloak. Once we were out of that room, 2 new dragons spawned to attack us. The first being Dream Scythe, who we killed no problem, and the other being Weaver, who we killed no problem. We then continue to clear our way towards the last boss of the dungeon, but before that we need to kill 2 more green dragons, Hazaz and Morphaz, and weirdly no loot dropped from them. And then it was time for the last boss, Shade of Iranicus, and I kinda thought that this was going to go bad since the tank kept getting slept by the boss. But in the end, we were able to take it down. And that's Sunken Temple. Pretty cool dungeon, to be honest. Lots of weird mechanics and stuff. I then returned to Ungoro Crater to claim my lovely new chest piece and finish off the quests from earlier, and kill a random helpless mage. And that's when I realised that I was now level 53. And well, if you read Hand of Justice, we are able to equip it at level 53. And if you haven't figured it out already, I was going to learn how to farm it on my mage, which means I would need the Shadow Forge key, which I could get from a Blackrock Depths quest. So, before I went and did that, I thought it would be a good idea to start the Onyxia attunement quest by completing Dragonkin Menace, which I figured out pretty quickly that I was way too low of a level for it. So, I called on a guildie to help me out, and we were able to get it done in no time at all. I then headed over to the Blackrock Depths entrance and began to search for a group. Luckily, I was able to find myself a group that wasn't doing absolutely everything in the dungeon, because that would take way too long. But we were going to do everything I would need to get a key. We started off by doing Arena, and our very first run we got a gorge spawn, but no SGC. We then went down the back of Arena to kill Pyromancer Lorgrain, and turns out that this is actually where you turn in the key quest. I always thought that you turned it in behind the very last boss, Dagran. We then went all the way back to Arena and started to clear our way to Anger. And I mean, hey, maybe we won't even need to learn a new farm, right? One can dream, I suppose. We then went down to Golem Lord, obviously so that the healer could have a chance at getting themselves the trinket, but unfortunately it did not drop. We then jumped out of the window to get to Incendius, and then obviously killed Incendius. We then get to the boss that we actually need, Phineas Darkfire. We just need to kill him and loot an item off of him. We actually then went and did the lava run in order to get the Molten Core attunement. Sadly though, I wasn't able to complete it because I wasn't a high enough level to accept the quest, which is fine I suppose since I can solo it later. We then finish up by going through this massive hallway that I still have no idea what's going on in, and then taking on Emperor Dagran Thorisan. I could then turn in the quest and I received my key, which means I could now start to farm out my beautiful trinket. So I logged on to my mage and I got to work. Of course I did take my time to do a bit of research beforehand, so I know what I'm doing, mostly. First step is to actually get to Anger. Luckily, that would be the easy part. This first hallway we could just run straight through because we're going to jump out of the window anyway, which is also a reset spot. Now in order to get past the next part, we will actually run up this side here and jump on top. Then it's just a case of jumping onto this invisible floor. The next part would be a little bit trickier since we can't pull any mobs, otherwise we would die. So we use an invisibility potion to run through unharmed. However, I am a complete idiot. The next run I actually do it right and we were able to invis our way through the mobs. Then it was just a simple case of clearing a few mobs in order to make it easier for ourselves. After that's done, we are ready to pull the boss. We first pull the boss with a pyroblast and start to clear off these small adds that were with him. Sadly though, one of the destroyers got pulled. Still not sure how, because it's definitely not meant to happen, and eventually it killed us. My third attempt was actually going pretty well, and we managed to get Anger low enough that he started calling in his second wave of mobs. But like I said earlier, I'm just an idiot and was not managing my health very well and died. My fourth attempt, we are actually successful and are able to take Angerforge down. Okay, so no Hand of Justice, but with these mage farms, usually I'm pretty consistent after doing it once, which is exactly how it went. My next attempt, we only got the Angerforge battle axe, but then the third kill came around, and Hand of Justice drops. I was ecstatic, pure joy coursing through my veins. Okay, well, we take that. But with my Hand of Justice in hand, that means that we had completed the goal for today. Last time we grinded through many zones, Paralis, Tanaris, Searing Gorge, and even Ungoro Crater, until we were high enough level to equip the Hand of Justice trinket, one of the absolute best pieces of gear I could get, which I managed to obtain by farming it with my mage after only 3 tries, which is the second time that's happened to me now. And after grinding for hours and hours, today is the day, because our goal is to reach level 60, the maximum level in World of Warcraft Classic. To start the day off, we were in Eastern Plaguelands at level 57 completing quests, and we had quite a lot to keep us busy. We had to run around and collect 15 worm meat, kill 5 plague hounds, 5 frenzied plague hounds, and 15 plague hound runts, which is quite a lot of mobs and would take a good few hours to complete. I then came across a quest where we have to open a grave and 5 mobs will come and attack us, and I was absolutely not strong enough to kill them normally. So I tried a couple of different ways. I tried running away and seeing if they would drop aggro. I tried the same thing again, but I put a rake on the mob that I needed to kill, but I think they share aggro or something. And that's when I remembered that I own a mage, so I brought her over here and was able to do it no problem. Is there anything that this class can't do apart from having an interesting raid rotation? Afterwards, I decided to do a couple of stratholme runs before it got too late and everyone went offline. Surprisingly, I did actually get into a group very quickly, although we did end up just going as 4. We started out by doing the Unforgiven, who can drop the Mask of the Unforgiven. Now, ordinarily, this would be an insane piece of gear, but we get to use the Wolfshed Helm, which would actually be BIS for us all of the way through TBC, and it actually did drop as well. We continued to clear our way into the courtyard thing and make our way inside. Things were going pretty well, especially for doing most of it with only 4 people, and that's when we got to the bottom of the stairs and we were clearing out a pack when I DC. Now that's nothing out of the ordinary for me. I disconnect multiple times a day. Well, turns out the entire server got DC'd. Probably some kind of attack if I had to guess. And by the time I got back in, I was dead with no party. Thanks, Blizzard. So again, I had to go looking for another group to run the dungeon with, and we once again start with the Unforgiven, then going into the courtyard area and killing Timmy the Cruel, and then making our way inside. And it wouldn't take long until we were all the way back to where we were before we DC'd, and then we take the next 5 minutes to clear all the way to the end of this long hallway until we get to Cannon Master Willie. Now, he did drop the Shadowcraft Spalders, and although that would be very good for us, clearly the rogue wanted it, so I ended up just passing it to him. We then once again need to clear through the long spiraling hallways until we reach the final boss, Grand Crusader Dath Rohan, who dropped a mail helm and a plate helm. Now, I actually didn't say goodbye to this group just yet, because we then went for a stratholme undead run. Now, I was mainly doing strat living just for the XP and quest completion, but the undead portion of this dungeon would actually have the chance at dropping one of the best cloaks for us, the Cape of the Black Baron, and the rogue promised to pass it to me if we went and cleared the Unforgiven again. So that's what we started with, and sadly, no mask. But we moved back to where we started and began making our way down the undead part of the dungeon. We make it to the first boss, Baroness Anastari. Now, she is actually quite a tough one, since she's going to mind control players, and well, all you can do is pray that your party doesn't just clobber you to death. We then clear the next few packs until we get to the next boss, Malachi. Not as interesting as the first, but he did drop a few useless items for us. We then head around the corner to kill Magistrate Barthalas, who one-shot me, but he dropped the key to the city, which I needed on and won, which is just a nice item to have. Now, the next part can be a little awkward, since we need to kill each of these belchers one by one. If you do pull more than one, it can get a little bit tricky sometimes. Once we had managed to clear them all up, a big bunch of skeletons come out of this door, which I just left to the mage to handle. After that, we can head inside and start to kill the very last boss of the dungeon, Baron Rivendare. Now, he is also quite a tough boss. He makes it so that I cannot stealth whilst inside of the room, and loads of ads spawn to attack us. And our first attempt, we actually did end up wiping, but we respawned and tried again, and this time we were actually successful. And even better, our beautiful cloak did drop, and the rogue stuck to his word and passed on it. So honestly, an extremely good run, since we were almost level 59 and had gotten a pretty rare piece of pre-bis loot. Excited about my new cloak, I returned to the Eastern Plaguelands to quickly do another quest. Simply, we need to run around and find these ghouls and then kill them, and then click on a spirit after it dies to free the spirit. And that's when I remembered that I still had something that I needed to do. Aquatic form. I could have gotten it like 40 levels ago, but for some reason I've put off getting it. So I flew over to Darnassus to pick up the first quest. First, we needed to just turn in the quest, which started the first trial. And you know, I've never realized how beautiful Moonglade really is, so it was nice just traversing the zone for a little while. All we needed to do for this trial is swim around the lake until we could locate the bauble container. After we turn in the quest, we start the next trial, which would be a lot more annoying than the first one. We needed to go to Darkshore and then swim like a mile into the ocean to find the first half of a pendant. And that's already quite a long trek, but we aren't done yet, because we now need to go all the way to Westfall and once again swim like a mile into the ocean to retrieve the second half of the pendant. At least this time I don't have to swim back to shore and can just teleport back to Moonglade, where we could turn in the quest and get our beautiful aquatic form. A 2-hour trip. Was it worth it? Well, I'm not sure, since I still haven't found an actual use for it. So with my new aquatic form in hand, I decided to head into the Burning Steppes, where I would list myself for a lower Blackrock Spire run whilst completing a few quests out here. Although I had completed basically every quest here already, there was still a few. I started by doing this medallion quest, simply kill some orcs and collect an item off of them, as well as killing Gortesh and ripping off his head. And well, not long after that, I was able to get myself a group for LBRS, so I dropped what I was doing and began making my way there. Once the party was full, we got stuck straight into it by clearing the orcs on the right side and dropping down. Now there is a few items from here that would be quite nice to get. Firstly, the Cloud Runner Girdle would be pre-bis for us, but also the gemstones would be a nice pickup, and they obviously allow us to get the key for UBRS. After a good 15 minutes of clearing mobs, we make it to the first boss, High Lord Omok, and he is a pretty simple boss, but he did drop the first gemstone, which I did need on and won, which is nice. We then make it to War Master Voon. Sadly, no gemstone, but he did drop the healer ring, which is a very nice pickup for the healer. We then take down Shadowhunter Vosh with relative ease. Now unfortunately, when we did jump out of the window, someone ended up pulling all of the mobs behind them, which sadly wiped us. But we respawn and are able to take down Mother Smolderweb no problem. We continue to clear past all of the ogres and bugs until we finally get to Quartermaster Zigris, the boss that can drop our much needed belt. Sadly though, he only dropped his footlocker. We then go down the hallway to take down Halcyon, and we get to capture a dog for the quest. I will name him Greg. And after another solid 10 minutes, we finally make it to the last boss of the dungeon, Overlord Wormthalak, who does drop the last gem, and very luckily I do manage to win the role. So at this point we were getting pretty close to level 60, and I wanted another chance at getting my waist piece. So once again I went back into LBRS for another run, and everything was pretty much the same. We went and killed Omok, and then went down to War Master Voon, and he did drop the last gemstone that we needed, and we do win it, which means we now had every single gemstone after only 2 runs, which is kind of insane considering it took me like 25 on my warrior. We once again kill Vosh and fling ourselves out of the window, only this time we didn't pull every mob in existence. We then took down Mother Smolderweb nice and easily, and that's when we started up the ogre boss. Basically, we needed to kill waves and waves of ogres, and turns out it is quite tough actually, and we wiped. And then the healer left. Of course, right before the boss that I needed, we get a selfish player. Well, all I could really do was do another run, and this time we were so close to 60 that I knew this would be the run that would tip me over into level 60. We do Omok, Voon, and Vosh, no problem, and of course Mother Smolderweb. This time though, we skipped over the ogre boss and began clearing our way up to Zigris, and that's when the tank went AFK and never came back, right before the boss that I needed. So at this point I quite literally couldn't be any closer to level 60. I would need just one more dungeon run, and I went with Upper Blackrock Spire for a few different reasons. Firstly, for the True Strike shoulders from the first boss, but also so that I could get attuned for Blackwing Lair. We start out by clearing all of the little rooms in order to progress through the dungeon, and that's when it happened. We finally hit level 60 on my 3rd ever World of Warcraft character. Although as excited as I was, we still had a dungeon to complete. So eventually we make it to the first boss, Pyroguard Emberseer, the boss that can drop the True Strike shoulders. But of course, it didn't drop. We continue clearing through the dungeon until we get to the room with Rend Blackhand inside of it, and we get to sit for 10 minutes and clear waves and waves of mobs until eventually Rend comes out riding on a dragon, which is perfectly normal, I suppose. Once again, we clear through the dungeon and get into the Beast's room, still one of the best bosses in any dungeon in my opinion. And finally was General Dracasath. He is also quite a tough boss, but someone kites Dracasath into the next room whilst we DPS down the adds that are with him. Once those are down, Dracasath comes back in and we can start to DPS him down. Now before we leave the dungeon, we first need to click on this orb at the back of the room and turn in the quests, and that's us now attuned for Blackwing Lair. Now obviously, hitting level 60 opens up a lot of opportunities for us, such as purchasing our first epic mount. And I know I could get to rank 11 and save like 700 gold, but my god, I am never ranking again, because the first time I did it on my warrior, it almost killed me. And honestly, this one looks insanely good, and I'm very happy with my decision. If you made it this far into the video, then go ahead and let me know in the comments, because it really does mean a lot to me, and I'm happy that that you enjoy my videos. Again, thank you guys so much for 5k. It really is insane to me that we're already at 5,000 subscribers, because we only hit 1,000 a few months ago. But as of new content coming, I've got a new character series along the way with a raiding video on the druid. The other thing is that I want to try and make videos longer, because I noted a few people saying that they would prefer the videos to be a bit longer, and I can do that no problem, but that means the schedule might change just a little bit. So instead of one video every 5 days, it will probably come to one video every 7 days instead. But we'll try it out and we'll see how it works. Anyway, that's enough yapping for today, I think. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.